The road ahead, it twists and turns, and the sun beats down and it burns. But I keep on pushing through. And every step quicker than the last, my feet tread down this beaten path, and I keep on pushing through.
People often say, well, what's changed with Parkinson's? And I tell people one thing, my sense of time. I don't need to know how you built the watch. I need to know how to tell time.
Yeah, I get up, and I may fall right back down, but your love lifts me back to solid ground.
He's a really nice guy. I hate to admit that, but he's a really nice guy. He was a year ahead of me in school. He was a trumpet player. I was a majorette. And we had mutual friends who, you know, how you ask the friend, is he dating someone? And he does the opposite. And then we started dating.
Oh, Ann came in very early on. We were high school sweethearts. She was a junior and I was a senior.
We got married the summer before he went to graduate school. And so I went along with him and got a job.
1974-76 was a tough time in the country. It was recession. Couldn't get a job, so I went on to Northwestern Management School for a couple of years. Basically, she put me through grad school, through business school, by working while I went to school.
None of his buddies were getting any bites on offering them a job, and they all shaved off their mustaches and beards, and suddenly they started getting offers right away.
First job was with this company, DuPont. I came out east to take that job. We decided that we would come out for 2, maybe 3 years, and then we would go back to Chicago or someplace like that in the Midwest, and I'd go get a job there, and then we would have similar upbringings to what we had in Ohio. 3 years turned into 36. I'm about 3 levels above where I thought I'd ever be. I was CFO of the company as well. Things are going along better than I ever expected. I was 55. And I noticed a little tremor in this arm. And so I went to my family physician, and she said, oh, you've got a benign tremor. A lot of people have them at your age especially. We'll give you something that'll take care of that. And so I was put on, at that time, a beta blocker. And 6 months later, I went back. Not only was it not getting any better, it was getting worse.
He was dragging his right foot a little bit.
To the point where I was wearing a hole in the toe of my shoe from dragging across, concrete and blacktop and those kinds of things.
And his right arm was he held it kind of funny. The tell-all was actually when we had family and everybody in for Kristen's wedding, and someone asked, had he broken his arm because he was holding it in such a strange way?
Everyone knew, including me, something was wrong. And it was getting worse, but we didn't know what. It went from a tremor to almost tremor-like, especially when public speaking, all over. I'd get up in front of a group to speak, and particularly the financial analysts and things like that, and I'd be shaking all over. The board of directors, I said, nobody wants to see a CFO that's shaking like that. Not managing my money anyway.
He needed to check with somebody and find out what was going on. And I think we both kind of thought maybe he had had a mild stroke or something, because that was kind of the way it looked.
was important that I get to the bottom of it. I think it's about 5 or 6 various neurologists and people that were testing me and so forth. I had a primary physician and I had a local neurologist in Delaware that I was using as the principals, and then whoever else had to be brought into that act to look at whatever the other possible causes might be. I don't like waiting. I don't like wasting time. I felt the medical community, while they are all good people and we're trying to come up with an answer, there was a lot of hurry up and wait. The pivotal moment actually occurred in that room because I didn't have a clue. And he looked at me and he just said, "You have Parkinson's." He handed me a book and he said, "Here, read about it. I have Parkinson's disease, and here's the book. That's all I know." That was not a good day.
I was waiting in the undertow, unaware of where my heart would flow. I was waiting in the undertow.
It's about 10 in the morning. I needed that day. So I went back to my office. And I shut the door and I read the book. It wasn't very uplifting. Should I quit work? Should I continue on? What should I do about my family? All of those things go through your mind, and you don't know where to go, honestly. About 6 in the evening, I knew there'd be one person there, and that was our CEO. And I thought I at least owed talking to him about it. So I went up and knocked on the door. He said, "Come in." We sat and we chatted.
I was absolutely shocked because, number one, I didn't know the disease well, but I knew it wasn't good. And of course, the first reaction is, "Are you sure?" Jeff was the kind of person that I had just tremendous confidence in. He always cared about the people that were in his organization, doing the right thing to support them.
He said, "Don't quit. We need you. You'll be fine. And we're going to get some answers for you." It was kind of like the ALS. I'd seen that up close and personal. I thought, in 3 or 4 years, am I going to be in a wheelchair? What's my quality of life going to be? That was probably worse than the thought of passing away, to be honest with you. There I was, doing well in my career, having a ride that few ever get the chance to even try, and here I'm living it. I'm not going to have the physical capability or perhaps even the mental capability to do that. As I told Laura about this condition, her only question was, "Will you be able to dance at my wedding, Dad?" That took my breath away too. You really feel something's been just jerked away from you, your life, basically. I don't think you're human if you can't be angry about that. Maybe I should quit tomorrow, get my things in order, spend some time with my family. So there's all those things going through your mind as you feel sorry for yourself and say, "Why me?"
He was scared, but he was realistic. I don't, where I was, let's get some second opinions here. This can't be this way.
He's, from my vantage point, a remarkable man. When I walked in the morning, he was waiting for me. And overnight, he'd lined up about 3 or 4 experts in the field of Parkinson's. They were actually movement disorder specialists. He said, "But you want to make sure you're getting the best treatment possible. And so you need to go someplace that really knows." And then he pulled out a piece of paper. He said, "This is the guy. That's the guy you got to go see." I called the appointment number. And I said, "Can I have an appointment with Matthew Stern?" They said, "Yeah, sure. About a year from now, 10 months from now, he's got an opening. I said, well, put me down. I didn't know how to accelerate that timeline. I had nowhere else to go. But I knew that I wasn't going to die from it. And I knew I probably had a little bit of time to deal with it, although I was anxious about that. You know, you are anxious to get the answers.
He couldn't sign his name or sign, or couldn't keep his hands on a keyboard. All those kind of things kind of started coming faster.
I'd moved through kind of the grief and anger time period and said, okay, it is what it is. Now let's figure out what we need to do about it. And I had already started doing some more exercise and things like that, just based on reading that said, you know, taking care of yourself is going to help. It's not going to hurt. And so I was doing the things I could do myself already as I waited to get to see Matt. That phone rang one day and there was a cancellation. I was up there the next day. I don't know what to expect, but I hope that he's got some answers for us, and Ann was going to go with me. I knew that there probably wasn't a cure yet because that was pretty plain from reading, but hoping that there was something, actually what I was hoping for, that he'd say it's going to be okay. So we walk in and we both go into the examination room, and he said, what have you been doing, reading things on the web and so forth? I said, yeah. He says, don't do that. He says, it's all wrong.
It was like night and day between the two doctors, what they thought, whether you try to do the most at the beginning or you wait until it gets worse before you start climbing what you're going to do.
He said, we're going to put you on a cocktail of medication that's going to make you 1% to 2% better than you otherwise would be over the next 20, 25 years. He said, this is a condition you can live with. And I said, let's go do it. Your cocktail is built up over time based on effect of the medication on the symptoms and do you have any side effects. It took about 6 to 9 months, as I remember. You're riding this wave of drugs moving through your body every day. Every 4 or 5 hours, you're taking your hit. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision to retire. I thought about it and advised upon about 9 months in advance. That allowed us then to build the transition plan. And in that transition plan was my own transition plan, where I wanted to keep connected to the business community, and I wanted to also try to make a big impact in the whole Parkinson's world.
I met Jeff Kiefer in July of 2015. He came in, purchased the admission ticket, and walked into the gift shop at the top of the lighthouse where I was working and asked if he could go outside and take a few photographs of this beautiful sunset. So about an hour and a half later, he came in, and I just said, oh, did you get any nice photos? And he said, I don't know, I hope so. So he started showing me some of the shots that he took, and they just took my breath away.
He never did anything creative necessarily. His work didn't involve that. It's interesting how he never has trouble walking when he's got all his camera equipment. He suddenly has the strength for all this, and nothing stops him.
I did not know anything about taking still pictures. I had a Canon camera. It was the first one that could do 4K. And they were advertising that you could get a still out of a frame. So I pulled the frame and made a picture. I thought, pretty good, I think, you know?
So I actually approached Jeff about possibly purchasing his art so that we could resell it for profit in our gift shop.
And we kind of sealed the deal. And I walked out and thought to myself, you got one picture, bud. You're gonna have to learn a little bit about this taking pictures.
We actually did not know he had Parkinson's. The fact that he can hold the camera steady and be able to capture these amazing images, that it's just amazing.
You use a tripod. During most of my day, I'd say 90 to 95% of what I was prior to the diagnosis. After 10 years of treatment with the cocktail, I began to have what they call wearing off of the drugs, and those tend to spike more and more as time goes on. And so that was giving me some long periods of off time, and off time is not fun.
The thing that probably frightens me most of all is like when he's sleeping and suddenly he thinks something's chasing him or after him. His reaction to it is very frightening. He has trouble knowing what is really happening and what is just in his mind. I mean, he'll jump up, he's fallen over coffee tables trying to get away from whatever is chasing him. Those kind of things are probably the scariest that I've experienced through what he's doing.
And that's when I call my zombie period, because I'm apathetic, the synapses aren't really clicking, and I become symptomatic. My tremor returns, and I drag the foot, and all that is back. It's predictably unpredictable, and I can feel it coming on, and I go, I think the meds are going. I've got to do something. Usually I take an inhaler, which is a rescue inhaler, to get me to the next period of time when I should be taking the medication orally. I've slipped off the edge somehow. It pisses me off because I know it can be better, but at the same time, it's frustration because you know what it is when you're on. I still golf, I kayak, I do the activities I always have.
No matter what he's going through, he always keeps moving. He pushes through. He doesn't let any challenge stop him. He's determined, and I believe that that's half of the battle right there.
He doesn't dwell on it. He doesn't complain about it. He just gets up the next day and does what he was doing.
The foundation that Ann and I set up ourselves was at the University of Pennsylvania, and I think they have a very good chance of finding some of the answers we need. In addition, then, the Fox Foundation, that's all they do is research to find a cure. It was like when I walked out of a research company, I walked into the same kind of thing, but it was a nonprofit doing research on Parkinson's disease.
He's creating more and more beautiful photos and adding to his collection. There is no downtime. By the time we get to the lighthouse at 9:30 in the morning, he's already been awake for 5 or 6 hours. He never stops. By the third year, we ran out of space at the lighthouse. There was no more wall space that Jeff could hang his art because he was taking hundreds and hundreds of photographs every day. The collection was growing. He decided to open a small studio.
I opened this up, and it's just amazing to me.
He's definitely enriched our lives. I feel truly blessed to know him and his family. They've become like our family.
I think just knowing that you can help somebody at the same time as getting something beautiful.
every now and then, it's like someone walks into your life and you just don't know why, but we feel like there was a reason why Jeff walked into the lighthouse that day.
Everybody likes Jeff. That's why I have to tease him, because everybody tells him how wonderful he is all the time.
There was a little voice saying, before it's too late, go do something else. There's no plan here, you're just kind of looking for the next cue.
Yeah, I get up and I may fall right back down, but your love lifts me back to solid ground.
So we just got to see Jeff Keefer's experience with dealing with the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. And I don't know if you guys got as worked up as I did, but to hear his saga, and here's a guy that has access to good medical care, but he goes through this process where he's given the diagnosis and he doesn't know what to do. He thinks he's going to be disabled in 3 or 4 years. He doesn't know whether to quit his job. And I think this notion of Jeff getting a book from his doctor, I mean, nothing could be worse. Right. And I know that the doctor is probably very busy and wanted to hand him a pamphlet or something that he could read about, but I think that's where things went south in him.
I say, does the patient know the diagnosis? Do they suspect they have Parkinson's? Because if they don't, it is hard. It is a hard conversation to have, and I think we do it, and we do it very gently, and you're right, with an optimistic view, but it can be quite shocking to a patient.
We both go into the examination room, and he said, "What have you been doing, reading things on the web and so forth?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Don't do that." He says, it's all wrong.
And every patient goes on the internet, and I'm struck by the misinformation that they get about their own sense of well-being and disease.
What's out there isn't very good. It is often quite indicative of a condition that will invariably lead to progression and death within a few years almost. It can be viewed as a very malignant disease. And therefore, the term Parkinson's could be viewed as a bomb to the patients and then to those that they are passing that bit of news to.
Well, I have had patients come to me and tell me that they went to see some neurologist and were just said, "You have Parkinson's. It's a progressive disease. You may not be able to walk in 5 to 10 years. And they're devastated. They aren't given any of the tools they need to figure out what to do with their lives except be sort of in this panic state.
And I'm spending this precious time I have with a patient undoing what a lot of other health professionals have done. And I think it behooves us to sort of reset the narrative here.
He said, "This is a condition you can live with." And I said, "Let's go do it."
I would have loved Jeff to be able to come in when I first saw him and talk about long-term treatment strategies, having him already know that he was going to be okay. But to have to sit there, and this happens all the time, to have to explain to him that, no, their perception of this is wrong, that they're going to be fine, we're going to get them on the right kind of medication when necessary. This is a very heterogeneous disease, and with the right kind of approach, patients live long, happy lives and function at a very high level.
For sure. I mean, I think just what you said, the first thing I tell patients is that no two patients are alike. So whatever they read, maybe in some generic way, but doesn't necessarily apply to you at all. My first comment to people is you are unique. Every person with Parkinson's is sort of unique, their own story, and we'll just work around your story.
Of course, we're asking patients to trust the experience and the judgment we've accrued with the experience of other patients like them, generating what we now consider the standard clinical criteria for diagnosis.
But in Jeff's case, I mean, for example, had any of us seen him a year before, it would have been a slam dunk, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because he had a classic tremor and classic reduction in arm swing. And that's the other thing. I don't know about you guys, but I find that a lot of patients are going to doctors with these vague symptoms and getting workups for things that have no bearing on the diagnosis. So I think, Susan, you bring up another really important point in this story, and that is, how do you tell a coworker? How do you tell your family? And when do you do it?
I was impressed that he went to talk to his boss, that once he felt he knew the diagnosis, he was secure about what was going on. He didn't want to keep it a secret. So I find that whole business of keeping your diagnosis a secret an added stress that many patients have.
And interestingly, you heard his boss say, I don't know anything about Parkinson's disease. So he's in the same boat as so many other people are. Jeff had to educate him as well.
Yeah. But his boss is a nice guy and was like, you're going to stay here. You're going to keep working. I think so many people keep it a secret because they don't want the stigma. They don't want people saying, oh, how are you doing? And so they keep it a secret. And I think that I have a lot of patients who keep their diagnosis a secret. And it's a problem.
I think the burden for most patients of keeping it a secret is really more problematic than the uncertainty of the response to revealing it. That's my general approach. But it's a personal decision. Yes. And had Jeff asked me when I first saw him, should I tell my boss, I would have said, that's really your decision.
Yes, it is.
It's not mine. It's not a medical decision. It's your decision.
Absolutely. There is an element that you can tell in Jeff's story that perhaps was somewhat liberating to just be able to set himself free from the burden of keeping the diagnosis to himself, especially with his boss. I think that is the other side of the coin of trying to ensure that you avoid the stigma and you avoid what might be perceived as the false sympathy, perhaps, and instead you begin to take control. That's another aspect of the control that he had, in fact, gained by taking the lead in saying, this is what I have.
Including their own family,
Indeed.
Which is amazing. And I have a patient who kept this from his kids for 15 years.
Wow.
Very slowly progressive PD, and kept it from his kids. It was amazing.
Jeff's situation is interesting in that it was his wife that noticed elements that perhaps Jeff himself didn't.
And his right arm was he held it kind of funny. The tell-all was actually when we had family and everybody in for Kristen's wedding, and someone asked, had he broken his arm because he was holding it in such a strange way?
It kind of brings up this notion of, when do you speak up? What do you say to a loved one when you're noticing something is not right? Meanwhile, the caregiver's churning inside, right? Spouse, you see this in your wife.
And that's a struggle.
You're going to be struggling there. You're going to be churning inside. You know something's wrong, but you don't want to alarm her.
I also have spouses who email me before a visit and say, I want to talk to you, but not in the room.
Yeah.
Can we leave the room because I don't want to upset my husband or my wife, but I want to tell you some issues that are concerning.
Yeah, interestingly, Jeff usually comes by himself.
I always make a note Did they come alone or did they come with a spouse? That's really, he's going to come alone. He's a tough guy.
He'll be happy to hear that. Well, it brings up another important point with Jeff, which is that when he comes in to see me, I don't say, how you doing? Because, a patient is going to say, I'm doing fine. They don't want to hear that they're doing poorly. But I ask him about his mood and his activities and his photography. Is he able to do it? It brings up this notion that sense of well-being is different for every patient. And as a compassionate physician, you've got to figure out, with the patient's help, what it is about that individual patient that defines their sense of well-being and go after it, right?
Yes, for sure. There really are specifics that we go through because we ask about sleep, we ask about bowel movements.
You do.
Yes.
You ask about them.
Yes.
But no one else does. That's the problem. Everybody, I'm telling you, the people you think are great doctors.
Yeah.
Patient goes into their exam room, the doctor says, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Patient says, I'm doing okay, good, I'll see you in 6 months. Boom.
Yeah, I think patients, this is why the educated patient is so important. They need to have their checklist too and bring it to the doc and go, Doc, I'm really constipated. I'm not sleeping. I'm not sleeping. So they can come with it if then the doctor has to hear it because it's,
But it took me a few years with Jeff
Yeah.
To get him sensitized to that notion. So,
Yeah.
when he came in, no matter how great he was doing,
Yeah.
we always could talk about his golfing, his kayaking, his photography, something that was either, affected or not affected, his mood.
But some patients get worried. So when I go through my checklist, they go, am I supposed to have a problem with my bladder? Am I supposed to have problems rolling over in bed? Because I don't. And then they start anticipating, if I'm asking that question, are they going to have that problem in the future? So it's really very interesting that you said, we don't want patients to worry. We want them to have a positive outlook. On the other hand, we really want to ask all the questions and make sure they're being straight with us about what their problems are. So there's this balance between getting the patients worried and sort of feeling insecure about their future, but still making sure we're addressing all their problems.
I'm about 3 levels above where I thought I'd ever be. I was CFO of the company as well. Things are going along better than I ever expected.
He's the chief financial officer, in control of his world, an executive who gets diagnosed with a disease that he has no control over. Suddenly he's cast into this world where he doesn't know what the hell's going on. I mean, that's a big effect, don't you think?
I think the control is in large part the product of knowing. Having a diagnosis eventually becomes important information, even if at the time of delivery, and unfortunately for Jeff, that delivery wasn't good. But as he learns about Parkinson's, he learns about the kinds of things that he does have control over.
The main therapy for Parkinson's, as we all know, is L-DOPA, and it works beautifully. We didn't start him right on L-DOPA. We started him on something called a dopamine agonist, titrated the dose over a period of months, and we don't do that in every patient, but then we chose to do it in him, and then added a little bit of L-DOPA. And the philosophy here was, let's get him on a low-dose combination of medications because I thought that would translate into a better long-term course. And not everybody does that, but that's what I did with him. Seems to be working okay with him.
After 10 years of treatment with the cocktail, I began to have what they call wearing off of the drugs, and those tend to spike more and more as time goes on. And so that was giving me some long periods of off time, and off time is not fun.
This is a problem we're seeing all the time now, is as his medications wear off, which they don't do a lot, fortunately, but in him, he doesn't just develop tremor or stiffness. He feels sad. He describes a change in his mood. And I think this brings up another sort of poorly understood or not commonly understood feature of Parkinson's, and that is what we call non-motor manifestations. People who, you look at them and they look fine, but they're feeling sad or anxious or have pain or feel depressed, or very, very common problem for for everybody. And Jeff, I think, sort of describes it beautifully.
In fact, it may well be that the non-motor aspects of Parkinson's become the most important of the elements that drive impairment, in some cases disability. And if we do not address them, then of course they will be there just as a reminder of the type of disability that we might wrongly be entirely attributing to the motor difficulties, the stiffness and the tremor, etc.
We saw Jeff use an inhaler, inhaled levodopa, a new drug, newly available over the last several months, as a bridging or a rescue therapy. These are bridging and rescue therapies that are now available. There are several of them. Have you had experience with it?
This is a rescue approach, best thought of for individuals that know when they may be in a dose cycle about to wear off, and therefore can medicate themselves with an inhaled levodopa formulation, which can then prevent their going into what's referred to as a wearing off episode. This is a bridged approach for patients to remain in the own state, the state at which the medication works best for them.
There's some other rescue therapies around too. There's apomorphine, and these have really become, I think, important adjuncts to our available therapies for these kinds of patients, don't you think?
So some of my patients have liked it, and some people have found it too cumbersome, so in the end didn't. But I do have some patients who use it and find it very helpful.
These are the people that also are very likely to remain engaged in sometimes their work or their hobbies. They're certainly the ones that are heavily invested into exercising.
You know, we all know how important exercise is, but I think it might be particularly important in patients with Parkinson's.
I give them the whole spiel that aerobic, strengthening, balance, I like them to do it well, but then, they sort of listen to me, and some patients, they find what they're comfortable. He's a golfer. I have so many golfers. Women golfers, men golfers, they love golf. They go to that. And that's
because they're walking. They're walking 3 or 4 miles.
They're in their fresh air, sunshine, it's good. But then I do add the strengthening, some aerobic, some really getting the heart rate up. I try to encourage them to do that. And then strengthening, I do, for posture, core,
and
balance.
there's even some data that it may delay the onset of disease.
Yes.
There are some interesting lifestyle issues here, diet, exercise, that may have a much more profound effect than we're giving it credit for.
Absolutely.
And I think, just to bring this home, I look at Jeff, and I think he's doing a lot better today than the same patient would have done 25 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here he is 12 years after his diagnosis. He has got some symptoms, but look at all he's doing, and look at his life. He's as active as he ever was. So I think there is a message here that with the right kind of sort of combination therapy from the get-go, patients can really, really do well like he's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, he's living a new life.
Have you asked Jeff what he would say to his former self with the information that he now has?
I think he would say to his former self, get in to see Matt Stern a lot earlier.
That's a perfectly sound advice to his former self.
Yeah.
Stern.